name's Lauren, and my major is graphic design.
Hi, I'm Kelsey, and I'm a textile design major.
Hi, I'm Alyssa, and I'm a graphic design major.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm an interior design major.
Identity has been experienced multiple different ways throughout European history. The contrast between having an identity that one is proud of and not knowing your identity has been something many have struggled with. Having an identity and having people ridicule you for it has also been a common theme throughout history. Moving through times to where many were stripped of their identity and told that what defines them is wrong. Identity is not only the foundation of you, but also the lens you view the world through. Affecting art, architecture, design, and social and political movements, identity has shaped each through transformative perspectives. During our trip, we saw many monuments paying tribute to different groups of people, honoring their identity as a community. These monuments spoke volumes to the people who were robbed of the simple things due to the way in which they identified.
Karl Lueger was the mayor of Vienna and a founder of the Austrian Christian Social Party. Lueger is credited for transforming Vienna into a modern city. Populist and anti-Semitic politics of Karl's Christian Social Party can sometimes be seen as inspiration for Hitler's Nazism. In The Papers of Dr. Karl Lueger, I Decide Who is a Jew, Lueger today is highly remembered for saying, "I decide who is a Jew," although there is no source for the words. He also said, "It would be in interest of all if the truth about this were finally made known." During an electoral meeting in 1895, he said, "An affair opened the eyes of the French, and even they will one day realize that the Jew has no fatherland and therefore knows no fatherland."
Propaganda is defined as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a political cause or point of view. During World War II, Hitler widely used posters and movies to persuade the viewer to side with the Nazi Party. The government would cover the truth in hopes of swaying people one way or another. This eventually caused people to lose faith in their government and join this new movement. While in prison, Hitler wrote his famous book, Mein Kampf, also known as My Struggle, and he dedicated 2 chapters for the use of propaganda. According to Professor David Welch, he saw propaganda as a vehicle of political salesmanship in a mass market, and argued that it was the way of conveying a message to the bulk of the German people, not to intellectuals. While intellectuals are being censored or threatened for speaking out against the Nazi regime, it made it easier for Hitler to rise to power. He took advantage of the less educated and more vulnerable people of Germany. Hired artists were also being stripped of their creative identity by being forced to use a certain type of style. According to Meg's History of Graphic Design, typographers and graphic designers were expected to reject modern styles, and artists of all types were expected to use regressive, representational styles in works that idealized the leadership of the Nazi Party.
While visiting the Terezin Museum, we saw many pieces of art that had been created by prisoners during the war. The art depicted what they were going through, how they lived, and portraiture as well. The art was a way for the Jewish people to express their individuality during a time where it was being stripped away from them. To avoid getting caught by the Nazis, the art had to be hidden in the walls. The few people that survived the Holocaust are the reasons that we have this art to reflect on today. Art is a powerful response to oppression and terror. In the museum, one artist that stood out to me was Bedřich Freda. He didn't portray a transcendence view, but rather a realistic one, using thick, bold, exaggerated brushstrokes to describe the real pain people at this camp were feeling at the time. In the ghetto, he worked as the head of a drafting room, but also engaged in illegal work. His work was so powerful and grotesque, he inspired many others, but later was arrested for propaganda of horror and sent to die in Auschwitz. The Jewish Museum in Berlin is an excellent example of how an architect can present a historical event through form. Daniel Libeskind called his design for the Jewish Museum Berlin "Between the Lines." The floor plan is shaped like a zigzag that is intersected by a straight line, creating an axis. Empty spaces called voids extend the height of the building at the interfaces. These voids were created to address the blankness that resulted from the expulsion, destruction, and annihilation of Jewish history. The zinc-clad facade is covered by diagonal slashes, which are the window openings. 3 paths cross on the lower level: the axis of exile, the axis of the Holocaust, and the axis of continuity, which leads to the museum's upper stories. Daniel Libeskind was born in 1946 in Poland. He first emigrated to Israel, then New York. Of his architecture, he says, "What is important is the experience you get from it. The interpretation is open."
One of the most powerful installations in the Jewish Museum was Fallen Leaves, which was created by Menashe Kadishman. This permanent exhibition was created for the memory void. There are more than 10,000 round, heavy iron plates that vary in size that are on the floor. These plates have open mouths in terror and faces of soundless screams shown on them. Each face is slightly shaped differently with unique faces on each plate. This is to portray individuality of each person who is being represented, although they were seen as the same people. Kadishman devoted the faces on the floor to all the innocent victims of war and violence. He created this exhibition so that visitors could walk on these thick metal pieces and hear the jarring, harsh sounds that were made when they get knocked against each other. When walking on the metal faces, they are representing the screaming of the people who suffered in the war.
While in the exhibition, a feeling of guilt came over me as I stood or walked on the metal faces. I was walking over what was represented as living people who went through violence and were not heard. A strong feature of this exhibition is when someone walks on the faces, towards the end they would just disappear into the dark. This has a representation to me of how the Jewish people would just disappear and would be taken without anyone saying anything.
From 1948 to 1989, Czechoslovakia was under communist rule. According to Tracy A. Burns, those who did not comply with socialism were not only interrogated, intimidated, and put under surveillance, but also subject to house searches, during which the secret police invaded citizens' privacy while searching for illegal literature. Under Joseph Stalin's rule, this was a dark and dismal era for the Czech people.
The memorial to the victims of communism was revealed in 2002, more than a decade after the fall of communism in Czech Republic. The memorial displays 7 bronze figures. All 7 figures are depicting the same naked man, and they are positioned descending a long staircase with a look of misery on their sunken-in faces. The closest figure is a whole body of the man. The second sculpture has a slit in his torso and his head. The third man is even more deteriorated, with an arm and part of his face missing. Each sequential figure on the stairs is missing more anatomy as though it is being torn away. The 7th figure only displays a little more than a pair of rough feet. Since Czechoslovakia was ruled by a communistic regime between 1948 to 1989, the country's citizens lived through widespread political persecution. I believe this memorial is very successful in portraying a story to the tourists and locals who visit this monument on what the people went through in the communist rule. Since the statue was one man, it depicts how everyone was treated the same. It also shows the deterioration of human rights during this time. The citizens were seen just as one person, not everyone having a unique personality. This monument is trying to show the viewers that the citizens living in Czechoslovakia during this time were stripped of their human rights and freedom. Communism wanted everyone equal. While I was standing looking at this memorial, I thought how fortunate I am today with the freedom of religion and speech.
The Berlin Wall physically and psychologically separated Berlin from 1961 to 1989. Beginning on August 13th, the wall completely cut off West Berlin from East Berlin. It was originally built to stop mass immigration and was known as the Anti-Fascist Protection Rampart. It implied that West Germans were equal to fascists. Many people were split from their families and lost their jobs because of this wall. According to History.com, on November 9, 1989, as the Cold War began to thaw across Eastern Europe, the spokesman for East Berlin's Communist Party announced a change in his city's relations with the West. Starting at midnight that day, he said citizens of the GDR were free to cross the country's borders. East and West Berliners flocked to the wall drinking beer and champagne chanting, "Open the gate."
More than 2 million people from East Berlin visited West Berlin that weekend to participate in a celebration that was, one journalist wrote, the greatest street party in the history of the world. People used hammers and picks to knock away chunks of the walls, while cranes and bulldozers pulled down section after section. Soon the wall was gone and Berlin was united for the first time since 1945. Only today, one Berliner spray painted on a piece of the wall, "Is the war really over?"
Historically, the majority of leaders have been male. This has helped shape what is known today as feminism. Feminism shares a common goal to achieve political, economic, personal, and social equality.
Today, the main reason women cover their hair or face is for religious reasons. According to the feminism exhibit at the Jewish Museum, Muslim women in Europe who decide to wear head coverings are often confronted with prejudices, claiming they are oppressed, uneducated, or foreign. Unlike the time when style icons like Grace Kelly would wear a headscarf for fashion purposes. Islam and Judaism women today find new ways to combine their religious practices in a modern society. Each type of scarf and ways of wrapping represents that person's identity and sets of beliefs. According to the exhibit, each of these women deals in her own way with the forces at work between tradition and participation in society and current social discourses. Unfortunately, women still get heavily criticized for never being able to please our masculine societies. On the wall, there was a cartoon woman called The Lottery of Indecency. It depicts the constant contradiction of what people expect of women. On one side is a woman wearing a headscarf being criticized saying, "You have a headscarf. My eyes, you're clearly submissive." While the other side is a woman with her hair done and a full face of makeup saying, "You look like a whore with your makeup. If you're not wearing makeup, you're neglecting yourself." It perfectly depicts the never-ending battle women experience when expressing their own identity. Even today, women are judged from a masculine point of view. This is commonly called the male gaze. Visual arts and literature present women as objects of male pleasure.
Identity is a multifaceted thing that defines a person.
It is your foundation and what you choose to add to it. But for many throughout European history, what was added wasn't a choice and wasn't a source of pride.
During our European excursion, we witnessed every level of identity felt by people throughout history, both positive and negative.
We viewed many different types of monuments and noticed that each represented and honored the identity of a group, a pretty powerful experience.